again, everybody, and welcome to Tiger Sidelines on MC22, along with my esteemed colleagues, Gabe Yarman and Dave Matter. I am Bo Bayman. Thanks, as always, for joining us. We start with the big news of the week. Ben Askren, or Askew, knocked out by Jake Paul. That's about the stuff going on at Mizzou. No, let's start with volleyball. The number 25 volleyball team saw its championship run come to an end. We touched on it a little bit last week. They lost to Ohio State in 3 sets. And as I said, we did talk about it last week, Dave, as it happened. It's just another run into the NCAA tournament for this squad.
Yeah, it's kind of what they do. They're good enough to make it that far, but not quite at that level to win that second round game and a second round match. A lot of teams, I think Gabe made this point last week, a lot of teams at Mizzou would love to be able to say that they're good enough to get there, but just not, don't have it what it takes to move on. But still one of the better programs on Mizzou's campus. Still the only Mizzou team to win an SEC championship. It's been 5 years now. So we'll see if they can do it again or someone else can do it.
Senior Kylie DeBerg was named an American Volleyball Coaches Association second team All-American. It's the 3rd consecutive season she's earned All-American honors. I know that they weren't happy with the results. They thought they could maybe give Ohio State a little bit of a better match, but it didn't happen. Still, they finish a great season out with another tournament appearance. The softball team is where I think, Gabe, most eyes are going right now. Number 16 softball swept Mississippi State, winning the weekend series 5-2, 4-3, 6-5. They had their midweek game against Kansas City canceled. The Tigers are now 32-10, 10-5 in the league. And this is the team that may have to carry the weight here in the spring.
Yeah, I don't think there's much doubt about that. I mean, I wrote something earlier this week. I said, at this point, you've got to say Larissa Anderson is Jim Sturck's best hire. I don't really think there's even any competition for it. I think she's kind of run away with that. So, they're clearly going to be in the NCAA tournament. And I think on that border of being a national seed and, hosting, it'll be close. They need to finish strong, but certainly in the running.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And this is something that you touched on, Dave. It's been a long time for an SEC champion. Now, there's been individual champions in sports, but a team champion in a while from Mizzou in the SEC. And you pointed toward Larissa Anderson's squad as the one that may get it done next.
I would think so. I mean, they're 3 games in the loss column out of first place behind Arkansas. And who do they play this weekend? They've got a 3-game series against Arkansas. So they're tied for 3rd in winning percentage in the SEC. And we know how good the SEC is in softball. They're an ace pitcher away from being, I think, a World Series contender because they have one of the best offenses in the country. They're having to rely on a bunch of freshmen and sophomores to pitch, and they basically tell them all, hey, nobody's a starter, nobody's a reliever, you're all everything. So that's what they go into every series as, and they're fine with, pitching 4 of those ladies a game because that's just their philosophy. But offensively, they're as good as anybody out there. I think, like Gabe said, I think it's Jim's best hire because we've only seen 1 year, the only 10-game body of work for Drinkwitz, but she's got that program, I think, right on the cusp of where it was under Aaron Earlywine. Obviously, he went to the Women's College World Series, but I think this program is really close.
Mizzou shortstop Jenna Laird named the SEC Freshman of the Week for the 3rd time this season. And when you guys talk to Larissa, I think she's just got that it factor that can make this program pretty dominating. Don't you feel the same way?
Well, I would like somebody to define that because I think that's a thing a lot of people like to say. I've heard it said a lot about Eli Drinkwitz. I mean, she's a good coach. She was good at Hofstra. She's good here. It shows in the results on the field. I've never quite known what the it factor means exactly, but if it means winning and doing better than the rest of the programs on campus, I think she's got that.
Well, the it factor got you on this show, Gabe.
Well, it's good to know. I never knew I had it till just now.
Well, you do. But Dave, you had a conversation with Coach Anderson, and I bet you came away impressed, didn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, she knows what her vision of a good program looks like. And she says right now, Missouri is really close to being that. I thought it was interesting to hear what she had to say about recruiting. She said they had to deal with a lot of negative recruiting when she first got there because of those NCAA sanctions that were just kind of lingering over the program. And now they're past that. She feels like they've made really good inroads around the state. They have one of the best players in the country from Fort Zumwalt West coming to the program next year as a recruit. They're really not losing anybody either. I think the thing is, she said she's really proud of is, despite all of this uncertainty with not just COVID, but those sanctions that were out there, they really haven't lost many people at all. The transfer portal is, they've been sort of immune to that, at least for the really good players they want to keep. So she's doing a lot of good stuff. And I think too, she was hired because she's about as opposite as you can get from Aaron Earlywine. She's very involved with the sport on a national level. And I wrote this today, he kind of relished being the outcast of the softball community. She is front and center with the National Fast Pitch Association. And I think she does things the right way. She's kind of known for that, but she's really tough. She's not a softie at all, really demanding. So I think she does actually share some characteristics of Aaron, but just goes about it a different way.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right. How about the other side of the spectrum? The baseball team has now lost 6 in a row. Mizzou was swept over the weekend at number 18, Florida, 8-5, 8-6, and 6-4. The midweek game against Missouri State was canceled because of COVID and contact tracing within the Bears program, but Missouri is 11-23, 4-11 in the SEC. They will host Georgia for 3 this weekend. Then the Tigers travel to Kansas State for a midweek game. But it's become a season to forget, Gabe.
Yeah, at this point, they're just hopeful that Texas A&M doesn't start to play well and Missouri can make the SEC tournament. It's hard to understand how the SEC does baseball. Like, everything is split into divisions, but then the divisions don't matter for making the SEC tournament. So it's a little bit hard to follow. But basically they are in 12th place overall right now, and the top 12 teams make it. And I mean, I don't know how big of a goal that is, but it's really the only goal they've got at this point, because that's their only chance to keep playing, is to get in that thing and somehow just miraculously turn into a team that they haven't been all year for about 5 days.
This is interesting to me because this is a team that prior to the COVID shutdown last year was tearing it up and was playing really good baseball. Now, they did lose some pieces from that team, but they brought a lot of guys back, but it just has not been the same this year, Dave.
Yeah, across the board, they are last in the SEC in just about every offensive category. Their ERA is in the 7s, and it's more than double the second to last place team. So it's been about pitching, and they walk way too many batters. They hit way too many batters. They give up a ton of sack flies. It's not like they're giving up all these home runs or anything like that. They just have been pretty bad in situational, pitching and just giving up the freebies. Offensively, they're not good by an SEC standard, but I think they've been better than what their record shows. Going into that Florida series last week, what were they, 2 or 3 games behind Florida, to where if they should maybe win that series, then you'd feel pretty good about, where they're trending. And they had some close game, or one close game there, and then just the bottom fell out. And that's just who they are right now. They're just not good enough to compete for anything better than squeaking into the SEC tournament, which is a shame, because I think that the expectations were a lot higher going into this season.
And this is a team that if they get some starting pitching, then the bullpen falters, or it can be vice versa. It's just been across the board, but it's hard to give up 8 runs in the SEC and expect your team to win.
And they lead the country in walks, and they're just not a very good team, and I looked back at some stuff because I've kind of long been on the bandwagon of, I don't know how Missouri ever really competes in this league. I look back, you guys remember that super regional against Louisville, the Chris Dominguez show. I look back, and Missouri, I believe in that series, had 9,400 people attend the series. Ole Miss and Mississippi State had 10,500 on Sunday for a regular season game. And look, that is not blaming the fans. I mean, there's a limit to how many fans you can even get in there. And hey, college baseball just isn't a thing that's on the radar of most Missouri fans. And so this is not saying if more people showed up, they would be better. It's just a measuring stick of what they're competing against in this league. When Missouri came into the SEC in 2012, all the focus was on how are they going to win football games? Well, they've been okay there, but nobody really talked about baseball. I mean, to me, when Missouri moved from the Big 12 to the SEC, this went from a decent job to a job that, I'll be honest, I don't quite understand why you take this job. Because in this league, I don't think this is a Steve Beazer problem. I think he's a good coach and all that, but I just don't know how you really get much better than, hey, scraping to get close to 500 and fight your way into a tournament every few years.
And to be fair with Tim Jamison, a lot of years they would underperform and then they stood up big and produced big in the Big 12 tournament. And that's how they got to some of those regionals. Now they had good years, don't get me wrong, but a lot of times, I can remember the last time they won the Big 12 tournament, they were a lower seed and just came through there.
Yeah, it was 2012, their last year in the Big 12. And yeah, some of those teams underachieved, I think, to some degree, but now it's to the point where you're barely competitive. And that's been the struggle. And to Gabe's point about attendance, and I'm sure we'll touch on Brian Blitz here at some point, but he made the point this week that just the struggle that some of these non-revenue teams and most of the non-revenue teams at Missouri face, it's just a reality of the demographics of the state is, you're competing for so many eyeballs in this state when it comes to women's soccer or even baseball or softball, gymnastics. Whereas you don't have that same competition in states like Mississippi and Alabama, where your only competition is your rival in college sports. You don't have the pro sports. And Brian wasn't complaining because he made a nice living for 25 years. He said that's just the reality of when you join the SEC. It just changed. The whole dynamics change. And baseball is really feeling the brunt of that right now.
Yeah, no doubt. We've mentioned the Big 12. Let's talk about the big story that happened late this week with wrestling moving back to the Big 12, leaving the MAC and going back to the Big 12 for the first time since 2012 when that all went down. But this is a big move and big news for the wrestling program, who has bigger places to be than 7th in the country, which is unbelievable to say, but they felt like they needed some bigger and better competition as they were just running through the MAC every single year. Now they'll get it by going back to the Big 12.
Yeah, we joked all the time about what are they doing in the MAC, right? They won 9 straight titles, and like at one point, I think it won like 90 straight matches or something like that. And so, but I think a lot of people don't realize, and I actually didn't realize until I started looking it up to write a story on this. I mean, it's kind of the Big 12, but it's Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Iowa State, then West Virginia, North Dakota State, South Dakota State, Fresno, Wyoming, Northern Colorado. I mean, the MAC, there are a couple schools I've never heard of in the MAC. Like I didn't know Longwood was a thing, until our Long River or Long Branch or Long something is in the MAC, so it's kind of a weird deal. That conferences they're kind of a sham. I mean, they exist in football and basketball as we know them, but for everything else, it's just kind of like, I don't know, let's find some teams that do the same thing we do and play.
And especially in wrestling, they've gone to fewer conferences with just huge amounts of teams. And to your point, Gabe, a huge footprint when you're talking about Fresno, you're talking about Missouri, Northern Iowa, the Oklahoma schools. The one key school that kind of kept this together in my eyes was Oklahoma State. When Missouri left way back when, Oklahoma State said, hey, that's still a program we want to wrestle. And I think that John Smith, the coach there, may have been a little bit on the forefront to bring Missouri back.
Yeah, I think we need to warn viewers that this is a one-time deal. Missouri football is not going to go back to the Big 12 or basketball. This is a very unique situation that Missouri has by, not having a conference to call its own with everybody else at Mizzou, with the SEC not having teams. But I think this is a good day for Missouri wrestling. It's going to guarantee you those matches against Iowa State and Oklahoma schools. Also, I learned this: Fresno State disbanded its wrestling program, but will be replaced by Cal Baptist. I don't know if that's a superpower, but Cal Baptist will be a Big 12 wrestling school here pretty soon. So maybe that'll be Missouri's new rivalry. Who knows?
I don't mean to take us down a bad road here, but I've heard those Baptists can wrestle, man. I've heard that's really a thing.
Well, congratulations. I know that Brian Smith is really happy to be back in the Big 12. And so it'll make for some of those home duels, against the Oklahoma States, against the Oklahomas and the Iowa States. Those will be back at the Hearn Center. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about the transfer portal. We have a tweet that we will get into basketball when we come back. You're watching Tiger Sidelines right here on MC22. Welcome back, everybody. This is Tiger Sidelines. Gabe DeArmond, Dave Matter, and I'm Bo Bayman. Thanks, as always, for joining us in our little Zoom happy hour, if you will. We are at Tiger Sidelines on Twitter, and Steve wants to know, after all the transfers shake out, what does it look like for Mizzou in the SEC, and when and where is MUKU being played next year?
KU's in Kansas City next year, right? As a KU home game?
Well, as long as they just push everything a year back. If they stay on schedule, wouldn't it be at one of the home schools? But I imagine they want to push it back.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I don't know. That's to be decided. I mean, will Missouri play Utah this year? I don't know if we'll get that one either, because basketball schedules, who knows with those. What was the other transfers? I don't know. There were some pretty high-profile players going to other SEC schools, and you don't want to say Missouri jumped the gun by going with the guys they got, because there's no guarantee who you're going to get. But other schools in this league definitely got the more high-profile, more recognizable, maybe more accomplished players across the board. I mean, not at every school, but at a bunch of them.
Yeah, Mitchell Forty actually wrote a story for us on that on Thursday morning, and I mean, Alabama got Namari Burnett from Texas Tech. He's a 5-star kid. Desi Sills was a starter at Arkansas. He's going to Auburn. And Auburn's got a lot of guys coming in. LSU, we know they're bringing in Xavier Pinson, and they'll buy some other good players for next year. Tennessee got Justin Powell, big-time kid from Auburn. I mean, so people this whole transfer portal thing was really interesting from Missouri fans' perspective, because everybody was leaving, and all of a sudden fans acted like they just weren't going to have a team, right? Like, oh no, we have Kobe Brown and Javon Pickett. You're like, can we even play next year? Well, they have 5 freshmen, and then they add 3 transfers, and those same people who were panicking suddenly said, oh man, I'm really fired up. We added these new guys. And well, like, you were always going to add somebody, but like Dave said, yeah, I think he's added some good pieces, but if you just look at it from what did everybody else in the SEC add, it is very difficult to argue for Missouri is any better than kind of middle of the road as far as the transfer portal, and maybe even a little bit below that. And when you consider they're not bringing anything back from last year, really, off a team that finished in 7th, like, I know we're in the off season, and every day you get further removed from the last loss, you get a little bit more optimistic, but I still have a very difficult time with a straight face talking about an NCAA tournament for this program next year.
And to add on top of that, how many times, Dave, are we going to hear they really like their 5 freshmen?
Yeah, I mean, and what are the chances all 5 freshmen are going to contribute immediately and be, productive players? There's going to be some that just aren't ready quite yet, or pressed into roles that they're maybe not ready for. So it's a big time chemistry experiment. Everybody to some degree is going to have that this year. I mean, some teams might have collected more talent, but it just doesn't work out between them. Maybe Missouri, it works out just with the guys that they mesh and gel, and their talents complement each other well, but maybe it doesn't. So we just don't know. This is going to be I can't remember a season. It's not just for Missouri, but it's across the board in their league, to where, what is the point of ranking these teams 1 to 14 going into the season? I mean, you always had kind of an idea. Okay, you put Florida and Kentucky up top, maybe Tennessee and Vanderbilt and A&M, and I don't know. Sometimes it's Ole Miss, sometimes it's Missouri near the bottom. But this year, I mean, it is an absolute crapshoot. And we can see, we know who's going where at this point for the most part. There's still probably 1,000 players in the portal, but most teams are kind of filling up. They're going to get some guys back that are testing the NBA draft waters, not in Missouri, but at other places. But still, you just have no idea how it's all going to come together on the floor.
And that really puts it squarely on Conzo Martin, doesn't it, Gabe, to where he, is buying the groceries. He's got to make the dinner as well. We'll see what he can do next year.
Yeah. And I just still look at this, and I said this, I was kind of the wet blanket on last year's team going into the season, because they were pretty close to the ceiling of what I thought they could be, honestly. Now, I know for a while they looked like they were going to be better, but when you take the whole body of work, I thought the ceiling was going in was about a 6 or a 7 seed, and hey, they got a 9, but there's not a pro on this roster. I mean, I don't think anybody's looking and thinking Amari Davis is going from Green Bay to the NBA. Now, when I say there's not a pro, I mean there's not an NBA player. I don't mean that these guys aren't going to make money playing basketball. There's places for everybody to make money, but there's not an NBA player on this roster, and you can't win things that matter in the SEC if you don't have NBA players, because almost everybody else has one, if not 2 or 3.
There's places to make money like Turkey, other places overseas, LSU, wherever you want to go. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about Brian Blitz as he steps down as the dean of all coaches at the University of Missouri. We'll talk about that and more when we come back. You're watching Tiger Sidelines on MC22. Welcome back, everybody. This is Tiger Sidelines. Gabe, Dave, and Bo here, and let's talk about gymnastics. Junior Hannah McCrary and freshman Sydney Schaefer of the number 14 gymnastics team wrapped up their seasons at the NCAA championships. McCrary hit the floor in the opening rotation, earning a 9.8 from the 6th judge panel on the floor. Schaefer got a 9.525 on the beam. They were the 11th and 12th Tiger gymnasts to earn individual qualifications to the NCAAs in program history in the 2nd and 3rd as event specialists. So congratulations to them. A big retirement in the Mizzou athletic department as Brian Blitz retired after coaching the Tiger soccer team for 25 years. He's the only coach in that program's history. He finished with a career record of 254, 216, and 39. And fittingly, he won his last game, and it was 1-0 against Kansas. So that's a good way to go out, but it's always been a given, when you go in the fall and football starting, you see the soccer program going, you're going, oh, I need to talk to Coach Blitz. And now he's decided to move on, but he, despite, not winning national titles and anything like that, he's built a solid program.
Yeah, and I had some folks when I wrote about this week point out, like, gosh, 25 years and only won 2 conference championships. I'm like, well, that's still 2 of the 12 over his time, at Missouri between the Big 12 and the SEC. So what's the standard here? Yeah, I thought he ran a clean program. Like, we never, ever talked or wrote about that program with any kind of the messy headlines that we've had in other programs. So I think that's part of the reason why he probably kept his job for a long time. Like, if you're a non-revenue coach and you're generally winning your games, but not hanging banners, but avoiding any scandals or controversy, you're going to work at Missouri for a decent amount of time. And he did. And I think they did really well academically year after year and in the community and all that good stuff. But I think he had a nice run. We'll see if they care enough to really invest in this program to win championships. I don't know if that's the case at Missouri.
That's going to be the next question. I even had somebody ask me, well, who replaces him? I said, don't ask me. I have no idea. And I don't even know if there's an internal candidate or if it'll come from outside, but this is to the larger point. Now it's a non-revenue sport. How much do they want to invest in a non-revenue sport?
Yeah, I mean, the answer thus far has been not very much. I mean, they built a new softball stadium because somebody stepped forward and said, we want to pay for that. They did it with gymnastics. They haven't really had that happen in the other non-revenue sports, but hey, one thing that I haven't run the numbers on this, but I'm going to guess Brian Blitz is probably going to be hard to catch as the Missouri record holder with 39 career ties as a coach. I don't think probably anybody else has ever done that or ever will.
I think you're right. And by Brian Blitz retiring, it makes Brian Smith of the wrestling team now the dean of coaches over at Missouri. Is something he talked about. He said, he told me, he said, I can't believe Blitz retired because it means that I'm furthest out on the plank now. And so the only way is to go overboard.
Yeah, I think he's all right.
I think he'll be just fine as well. Want to mention Mizzou Athletics plays 52 student athletes on the Winter Southeastern Conference academic honor roll. And that includes basketball, equestrian, gymnastics, and swimming and diving based on grades from 2020 spring, summer, and fall. So 52 student athletes making the honor roll is pretty good, especially if you're wondering who's going to be the next team to win an SEC title. You might as well be getting your degree.
Hold on. Does Mizzou have an equestrian team?
I don't think they do.
Okay. I didn't think so. Like, I know Auburn equestrian is really good. I think Georgia won the national title this year. It seems like Kentucky should be better, right?
Yeah, good
You would
point.
think.
But yeah, I didn't think Missouri had equestrian, but I don't know. I know there's a couple of horse places around town. So.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, that's going to do it for this show. Hey, we want to remind you, tweet us, please. We need your questions to keep our show rolling. But for behind the scenes, Matt and Brian, that's Dave Manner and Gabe DeArmond. I'm Bo Bayman. See you next week on Tiger Sidelines right here on MC22.